prayer, and then would you do us with a prayer, brother? Would you want to do that? Okay, what's your number down there? Number 1. All right, Representative Rutledge, would you lead us in prayer? All right, that's right. As long as it got above the ceiling, we're good. Thank you. Representative Rakestraw, you got a proposition you want to present to us today? I think we've got a sub in our committee. You want to talk to us about your sub? Yeah, go over to the microphone. We're on. We're live.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. We have substitute to House Bill 833 LC 363578 ERS should be in your folder. And this bill is for the surveyors, and it removes the requirement for hydrology coursework and hydraulic engineering prerequisites from the education currently required for licensure as a surveyor. If you'll look on 292, that's what that deals with. And if you look on 290, these engineering courses are to be replaced with 3 additional surveying courses for a total of 18 semester hours. And it'll open up educational offerings to other colleges and universities across Georgia that don't have an engineering department. And it'll also give a much needed bolster to the amount of formal education preparing new surveyors for public practice. So there will be a two-year grandfathering, if you look on 296 period, where either the new or previous education requirement will be accepted. And so any student or employee that's currently in the process of obtaining the required education will have sufficient time to complete it under the same rules that they started. The hydrology requirement was placed in the law in 1994 to address and clarify the historical practice of incidental civil engineering performed by many surveyors at that time. Since then, such civil design by surveyors has dropped sharply. There remains in the bill an option for applicants to additionally choose to meet the current hydrology requirement on lines 345 and 347 and have their license marked as hydrology and design authorized. So the bill doesn't shut the door on the hydrology practice, it only makes it optional moving forward. Line 343, all surveyors licensed prior to July 2018 will also be grandfathered to be able to continue this same scope of practice. No currently registered land surveyors will be affected. And line 705, to address the concerns over the scope of practice and activities of others, the bill requires for exemptions for all state government, county or city governments, regional commissions, and utility authorities. And we do have the support of the ACCG and the GMA. Line 729 provides for exemptions for contractors of highway and construction projects so they can clearly provide their own layout work within the boundaries of their projects. And a broader, more comprehensive redefinition was discussed and drafted with all parties involved, but was removed from the bill so that the larger GIS and geospatial communities can have more time to study such effects and provide input after this legislative session. So the other minor tweaks in the bill that have been requested by the surveying community that are seen as necessary by legislative council appear in the bill, such as to address license versus certificate and professional in front of land surveyor or persons to individuals, and as well as renumbering some of the paragraphs. So that's basically the changes that we're making in this bill.
All right, that is short and sweet there. Anybody have questions at this point in time? We've got several people, I think, lined up to speak on 833. Chairman Martin.
I'm not a surveyor, did stay at the Holiday Inn, but let me see if I can draw lines here. No, I'm just kidding, Mr. Chairman. No, it's a serious question. You mentioned as you were going through, and you were very quick in your remarks, but you mentioned, and it shall not apply to governments and so forth. Always worries me when we make private sector people do things and we don't make government sector people do the same things. Can you tell me about that in a little more detail? I guess I just want to make sure we're not taking, we're not shortcutting the educational requirements or the professional training that would be needed, should a government entity, heaven forbid, cross over into private property by accident when they were out trying to mark their projects and so forth. Can you talk to me about that, or would somebody else?
Okay, so it's my understanding that a lot of the hydrology stuff is being handled by the architects at this point in time, and so it's still a requirement in the training, and so a lot of people are turning away from surveying, and so they want to change the requirements to be more applicable to what they're actually doing and using on a regular basis, and let hydrology live where it's been living, which has been more in the architecture space.
No, I understand, and that was the first portion. But as you finish the comments on there, you mentioned some portions, or maybe I didn't hear that this would not apply to governments and city governments, government entities.
Line 705, I
Yeah.
think you mentioned
Yes.
705.
I will let them speak
Okay,
to
that's
that
fine. I'm
because
happy-
that was some last minute changes that they made, and they can
Fair.
give you their reasoning why they wanted that in the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's
That-
fine.
That's 705 to 708.
Right.
I don't know, let me ask a question here. Dan Lee and Danny Noble, are y'all speak on this bill, or have y'all got another bill you're speaking on? Next bill? All right, trying to read. Some of you guys write as bad as I do. Mark Chastain, yeah, you want to speak on this bill, Mark, and help us out, help us dig us out of the hole here? And Justin, I think, are you, okay, you want to speak too? Okay.
Thank y'all for taking this up. I appreciate it. I'll try to be brief. Understand the gentleman's question. The exemption in 705 was crafted a few weeks ago in a meeting with all the parties that we were aware of, a lot of GIS folks from the state and local governments across the street, or actually 2 streets up. It's in there for 2 reasons, and I'll try not to over-explain it or drag out. If I do, just do this and I'll move on. I represent the Georgia Board of Registration for Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors. I was appointed 15 years ago, and part of my role is to investigate complaints and be involved in disciplinary actions. A hypothetical situation is not hypothetical. A situation has come up where an engineer prepared a set of plans using information acquired from a county GIS site that turned out to be inerrant a little bit. Created a supposedly $150,000 change order, and the client wants to know who's paying for it. So this would provide an exemption and a protection for the local governments, even though you have sovereign immunity. I served 2 terms as a county commissioner up in Gilmer County, and I understand just a little bit about the law and how it works. But besides sovereign immunity, this would protect the counties and cities from even having to explain that or put up a defense. The other question is, as you may hear or have heard, is other states like South Carolina and North Carolina have vigorously brought GIS professionals, even in the local governments, under their umbrella and regulated and licensed them. That is something that Georgia, speaking on behalf of the board, I don't know if it's the same as the professional society that's represented here, and my own personal feelings, have no desire to regulate the state and local GIS folks. They do what they do. They provide a good service, a good value for the taxpayers. This is to remove any doubt, because I may not be on the board forever, and the next guy who replaces me may want to take a sterner stance with the local governments and try to regulate them. And this exemption would take that off the table, where they could not be subject to something like they have in other states. This would provide a direct exemption for them from those services that they do, which is the geospatial GIS stuff, not carte blanche engineering and surveying on their own, which would be done by licensed individuals to protect the public anyway, but in the course of what they're doing right now to protect them from any unwanted circumstances.
All right, stop right there.
I was going to anyway, actually.
Okay.
I maybe I'm not grasping this entirely, but I think what I heard you say there is a city or county may have GIS data, and there's multiple layers of that. I mean, they could have it, everything from their EMS to where their water pipes are, where
Yes,
they, I
sir.
mean, at some point you hope to get everything layered in there, where any underground utilities and so forth. But it would seem to me, and what I have a concern with, if they're going to take it on themselves to do that and publish it, out there for the public, that they've either got to take responsibility for having quality data out there, or put a big flashing red sign on that, hey, we think this is right. But what I read here is, nobody's going to be looking over them. I mean, maybe I'm crossing into an area we don't need to get into today, and if so, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield. But I just want to make sure that we're not doing something, because if there was that city and county that wasn't a hypothetical, and they put that data out there, and there was some reasonable representation, that an engineer went on there and thought that was the way it was.
I think pretty much you're gonna take the data, but it's like everything else, you need to look at it, it's sort of trust but verify. When you get into the working out there, you're gonna have to verify that some of the data you've got is correct. I mean, that's been my philosophy a long time. I'll believe everything you tell me, Chuck, but I'm gonna verify most of it.
No,
I think I should be offended by that, but I'm not going to get on anybody. No, I understand, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I won't belabor the point. I just want to make sure that we don't, by doing this, take their focus over getting it right.
And
I think that's a
Just
valid.
because they're the government, because we've all heard that. We're from the government. We're here to help.
Some of the most feared words in the English language, as
Yes,
per
sir.
Ronald Reagan, and I agree 1,000%. What this basically does is they do this now. What this basically does is just allow the status quo, you might say, to continue. And most all the sites that I've used, and even some counties, if you request the specific data to be transmitted to you and not just obtained from their website, they have a release and a disclaimer that says you recognize that you're using this on your own. So it is incumbent upon them to make those disclaimers visible for the public. But what they're doing in sharing data, wetlands and where their water lines are, they're sharing it with the public and with their own agencies. And we personally don't have any desire to try to regulate that. As you say, it may be good, and that may be the very same thought process that the Carolinas were thinking, that they the government should not be given a pass. But this has worked thus far, and the only clarification is I believe our board may take up some clarification for how the engineers are to deal with data like that in the future, but I don't see anything wrong with giving them this exemption, but that's strictly y'all's decision.
So
Yeah,
yes, sir. You believe by doing this, it'll encourage them to try to continue to do best efforts to keep a good baseline. But when this data, like you say, there's a difference between hitting a screen print and actually downloading the underlying data. When you go and enter into an agreement or a contract to do that, it says, this is, to the best of our knowledge, the way it was the last time somebody was there. We're doing this to help you out, but you're on your own.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I do agree. I don't think this will make it worse. The technology and the practices continue, and I'll stick up for our friends in the GIS community and say that they're not turning out faulty work. Sometimes nobody's perfect and always scores 100, which was in this other situation, but I don't see that as a concern that bothers me.
all right, let's if we're done with that one, let's roll on to the next one. Anybody else? You okay, Chairman Martin? Okay. All right, is it, Tim Poe, you want to talk to the bill? I think you're the only other one. Does anybody else Justin, okay, I'll get you back up just a second, Justin. All right, Mr. Poe.
Thank you. Originally, I think I sent emails to almost all of you saying that there was an opposition on 704 to 707. We no longer have that opposition and support it as it is presented to y'all today. So that's really all I got to say.
Well, that's very nice.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, my friend. All right. Justin, you got anything, my friend?
All I'm gonna say is that we support the bill as mentioned by Representative Rakestraw.
And this is the
Georgia Municipal Association.
Georgia Municipal Association, okay? Anybody else support it? We got our surveyor friends here. Everybody else is, all right. Any questions for the committee at this time? I appreciate you working, Mr. Poe. I got your email last Friday morning. I sent it to Representative Rakestraw. I called her and I said, okay, what's going on here? I said, I'm not gonna referee a fight. Y'all get this thing worked out before we get together, or else we'll have blood in the streets out here, so, But thank you for working with them, and for y'all working together. I appreciate that. Number 8.
Mr. Chairman, do we have consensus on this bill?
Well, it appears to be. It's scary.
And it's very scary.
Yeah.
I'm
we-
nervous.
We usually have somebody mad when they leave. Yeah, you could, no, I'm gonna cut you out. We got a lawyer here. He can make somebody mad before we get out of here. All right. Do we have a move and second on this piece of legislation? Got a move, second. Any other discussion? All in favor, let them say an aye. And thank y'all so much for working together on this. That was very good. We appreciate it. And
Thanks to all
thank
of
you.
y'all for entertaining it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Representative Rakestraw. This will
Thank
be
you very
available
much. I appreciate it.
in rules, day after tomorrow. But you need to go by and fill out a form down there when you get a chance. Well, that was very nice. Very nice. Feel the love. All right, Representative Lott, you have a measure before us today, and I'll tell you what, now you talk about government working fast. You just got this bill signed to committee about 12:30,
Yes,
and what time is it now? 2:30?
2:30.
2:23. We're hearing your bill already.
Great,
So
thank
you
you.
should not have any complaints.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee, for allowing me to bring this bill. This is a LC 363526. It is House Bill 835. What the bill does, it allows any licensed dealer to apply for a special event permit for tobacco, cigars, cigarettes, or loose or smokeless tobacco products, or a temporary location off-site for the licensed from the licensed location. These few lines here, that's a one-page bill, gives a 1 to 10 day permit upon request, specific to the location and dates at which you are hoping to have an off-site sale. And this allows for up to $10 fee for the permit, and the permit will be issued by the Commissioner of DOR. Purpose of this bill is that currently, as alcohol and others can do off-site sales, our tobacco industry cannot. What they have to do is open up, basically get a separate sales tax license for filing, and when they file their sales tax, they have to file them as if they're two separate businesses completely. Now, this does not cross into any of the local government's ability to regulate smoking. This doesn't change anything for my folks that are hoping to have off-site sales. They currently do it. They just have to file everything as if they're two separate businesses. So all we did was open up this part of the Department of Revenue Code section to allow them to get a temporary permit to be able to keep their business tightly enclosed. I live on the border of Richmond County and Columbia County. Columbia County has strict smoking ordinances. Richmond County does not. They still have to follow the guidelines for the county in which they're trying to sell. I'll take any questions.
Thank you, madam. Representative Rakestraw, have you hit a button or you have a question? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so do you have an example of when this is used? I mean, I was thinking about the people that walk up to you in like bars and restaurants to say, hey, we've got American Spirit. If you fill this out, we'll give you a pack, but that doesn't deal with sales. So in what instance
So
would be?
in an instance for this, it would be Washington Road in Augusta, Georgia, the first full week of April. And that would be where you would go down to a little golf tournament that they have that gets fairly well populated. So there are restaurants that will open up tents in parking lots outside in the back, and they will allow these, so cigar shops can come down, and they will sell cigars in the tents, depending again on local ordinance. Some are strict outdoor only, based on counties, but in Richmond County, they have the freedom. So we have this ability to do such a thing. We just can't file under one business. Now we have to multiple anytime there's an outdoor event in that community.
Okay, thank you.
Number 11, Roger.
Not a question, just a comment. I appreciate you clarifying why a healthcare professional was advocating for more tobacco usage at the Masters. So I understand that now.
Well, they already allow smoking, certain areas, trees. So I'm not promoting smoking. All I'm trying to do is help my people file their taxes more safely.
All right.
Working for her people.
I am working for my people.
Okay, Brett and I were kind of concerned about a healthcare professional advocating for more.
Yeah.
You're the one that wrote it. I think we got a couple of people want to talk about your legislation, my dear. Hold on. Yeah, okay, any other questions from the committee? All right, Dan, was this your bill? Nope, this ain't your bill either, okay. Danny, no bill, this is not your bill? Okay. Scott, this is your bill? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Scott Maxwell. I represent the Georgia Public Health Association. And it's not really my intent this morning to rise and oppose this bill. But we have some concerns. Public health makes a tremendous effort to target teenagers, young people. Most of the people who smoke, nearly 90% who smoke today, started when they were teenagers. So there's a great emphasis and effort to target young people and with a message of don't smoke. So we're kind of against something that makes it easier to smoke. If they sell cigars at the Masters, we're not going to object to that at all. But we do wonder whether or not this bill will allow cigarettes to be sold at concerts and festivals and places where huge numbers of young people gather. I don't have yet a legal interpretation of how it really affects us, and I apologize for that. But as the chairman pointed out, it got put on the committee really quickly, and at 1 o'clock I was at a Board of Public Health meeting and had to race back over here to get here and just say, we have an interest in the bill. I'm not here to hold the bill up today, but wanted to let you know that if somehow we found language that kind of made it so you couldn't target young people, youth in this, and I don't know what that language would be, we might later come back and I didn't want the chairman to say, Scott, where were you when we had this in committee? So that's my only point today that we're looking at. Is there a way to keep young people from being targeted? I don't have to remind this committee how much Medicaid taxpayer dollar is spent on treating tobacco-related illness. And again, I'm not even here to ask you to hold the bill or anything, because I'm not sure we can find the language I'm looking for, but I haven't had time to have the attorneys research it yet.
All right, Scott, thank you. And I apologize for the quickness in getting you down here. But now, according to what I understand from the gentlelady here, that this is something that can already be done now. We're not changing what is being done. We're just changing the cost to the businesses. Is that correct? The only thing you're working through the Department of Revenue is allowing them to get a temporary permit without having to set up the whole shebang.
Yes, cost and ease of filing. And just to address his concern, the smoking ordinances are done at the local level. We certainly have some state requirements that everyone has to follow, and even in these folks that open up currently with a separate license, they still have to follow the state guidelines
So
on
we're
smoking.
working with the Department of Revenue Code in just changing the permitting process that's already
Correct.
available.
Correct.
That help you any, Scott, or does that make you either? Or?
I want people more expert than me to look at it from our
Okay.
and I just wanted to kind of put that to you.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, Chairman Martin, you have a question, my friend.
Mr. Chairman, you got to mine. I thought it was already able to be done now. We were just facilitating the payment,
Right.
and the business operation.
Okay. Number 7, yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you have an idea, Representative Lott, about how much the permit would cost for, say, a business in your county that wants to sell tobacco products, cigar products at that hypothetical golf tournament we're talking about? Without the passage of your bill, how much does it cost him to get a permit to sell from a tent at a golf tournament?
I do not know the answer to that. I can get the answer to that because it would be whatever the burden is on them to get a full separate sales tax number. And that's what the majority of this is about. It's about the fact that they have to have a separate number. So I'm not sure if there's a fee involved with that. There is someone here, I believe, from the Department of Revenue that might have an answer to that question. It might be. Do we have DOR? So I'm not
Okay.
sure what it costs a business right now to get a separate sales
Right.
tax license.
I was just curious how you arrived at the $10 amount for this permit, because that
Oh.
seems awfully low. I
Oh,
mean,
that's a solid
you could
question.
barely buy a pack of cigarettes for
That's
that.
that's a great question. That is the current standard,
Yeah.
but the Department of Revenue chose the language for that.
Okay.
We are going for parity on what happens with alcohol licenses at this
She just
time.
compared it to
Much
Okay.
of what we did was just basically what the alcohol folks are allowed to do. We just moved it
Mirrored
over. So
that.
the Department of Revenue helped generate this wording.
That good? So you just mirrored the same thing that they do for alcohol departments, you do it for them? That's not, Sean Marie?
It was a,
Okay, what number you got, my dear, 10? Punch your, is the back of your light on, oh, hold on a minute, let's try it now.
That the $10 fee, if I'm not mistaken, was derived from, that's how much it currently costs
Okay.
to get a license. Each time that they have to get one.
Terry, push the back of her little button back there, the little green. There's a little green button back there that may be off. All right, Sean Marie, try that again, please.
I believe that the $10 is the amount that it currently cost to get that license.
Okay. Want to make sure everybody heard that. Are we good? Any other questions? Anybody else want to comment that didn't sign up? All right, what's the will of the committee at this point? Got a move and a motion and a second do pass. Any additional questions? Right down the fairway, it says. Okay. All in favor, let them say an aye. Any opposed, like sign. Thank you, ma'am.
all right, thank you.
And
Thank you, committee. Thank you, Chairman.
all right, and Scott, you keep us updated on what you find if you've got something that needs to be changed. Thank you, sir. All right, we've got one more proposition. And we got Representative Cobble, are you here? All right. Oh, we done got to move to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. So I bring before you this afternoon House Bill 826, LC 41-1353. This is a simple bill. Current code essentially requires that an alarm monitoring company, make a reasonable effort through a two-step verification, try twice to verify an alarm before requesting dispatch of law enforcement, with a couple of exceptions. The first is exceptions in the case of fire alarm, panic, or robbery in progress, and secondly, in cases where crime is in progress and has been verified by audio or video. This bill simply adds a third exception, and that is in the case where the alarm user has contracted with the alarm monitoring company for that direct dispatch of law enforcement. So that's the bill that you have before you. We did have some language here based on feedback that we were receiving on concern of false alarms, which we certainly are sensitive to, know how much we want law enforcement, how hard they are out there working for us, and we want to make sure that we're sensitive to those concerns. And so we have some language here that I could provide as well to the bill.
Are y'all comfortable with the amendment? Are you and the other parties, you think, comfortable with what, because he mentioned to me earlier that there was a couple of caveats I think they want to put here, but I
Yeah, so
said.
if I may, I certainly am, and we could allow them to speak to whether the amendment would allay their concerns. The amendment would be on line 30, where it says cases where the alarm site or alarm user has contracted. We would certainly simply insert after alarm user. So it would read cases where the alarm site or alarm user is a banking institution or a wholesaler or retailer of firearms or pharmaceuticals and has contracted with the alarm monitoring company. So we essentially would be limiting that direct dispatch to banking institutions and wholesale or retailers of firearms and pharmaceuticals. So the intent here is that those retailers or wholesalers would have the opportunity, if they so desired, to contract for a more direct dispatch on the activation of an alarm.
Okay, and Sean Marie helped you with that.
That's correct.
And,
Yes, sir.
all right, we've got 3 people to speak to the bill. Let's see if this allays their fears of what they
Certainly.
want to say.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Lee, come on up. I've called you all 3 bills. You want to talk about this one? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here as a lawyer representing the city of Sandy Springs. Last year in Sandy Springs, 97% of the alarms that went off were false. $790,000 was spent responding to false alarms. This is a problem throughout the state of Georgia, and the problem needs to be addressed, but it doesn't need to be made easier to have a false alarm. The 2-call verification was made part of state law, and it is, even though state law exempts fire calls, the state fire code allows that you have 2 calls, 2 verifications. The body, we would ask the state to be looking at making it more accurate, not lessening it. And I understand that there are places where burglary is more suspect and that we need to do more there, but I would submit to the panel that lessening the authenticity of the call, of the alarm itself, is not the way to go about it. And let me cast this one edge in there on behalf of my brothers and sisters of local government, that it can be different in different places and should be allowed to be affected differently by different local governments. I have with me today Captain Nabel. Come on around, Captain. If I could bring him on up, Mr. Chairman.
All right, let me ask you a question as he's
All right.
coming up. All right, so y'all had 700 and something thousand false alarms. Now, do y'all charge after the second alarm, a second false alarm, you charge them a fee?
The
Or
reason
y'all give them
we do, Captain Nabel's going to talk about this. This is such an acute problem across the state that the Chiefs Association has a task force on false alarms. They have a task force on burglary, task force on armed robbery. They have a task force on false alarms.
I understand that.
And Sandy Springs has gotten so bad that what we've done, we've tooled our ordinance to where we no longer seek to penalize the homeowner or the business owner. We penalize the monitoring company because they do not verify. We have a huge problem with them not registering their homes, so that our first responders don't know exactly where they're going and what they're going to. And it adds to my argument I made earlier that this needs to be more scrutinized, not taking scrutiny away.
I understand that, but so somebody is paying though after the second alarm. Y'all give them 1 or 2 freebies. Y'all give them 2 freebies, and then y'all start charging either the alarm company or the homeowner. I mean, somebody should be paying for these false alarms.
In the past, under our old ordinance, which is a model ordinance that many places have adopted, you had 2 free false alarms per year. Under our new ordinance, where we've realized that what we've been doing for 25 plus years is not working, under the new ordinance, there are no freebies. The first false alarm is a charge, and then the second false alarm is a substantially higher charge. And if you have 4 false alarms at a particular location in a rolling 24-month period, then you're considered a nuisance alarm. And unless there are extenuating circumstances, it's not eligible for response on an intrusion only. Of course, fire, panic, duress, holdup, they all always get
So y'all have taken care of that, but now this gentleman is trying to address particular industries that, and I didn't write down all of them, but we know firearms, drugstores, and I got a buddy of mine that's a pharmacist. He had to put a safe in and a steel door across the front and all that because people breaking in, getting the drugs out. But by the time you make 2 phone calls and the officers get there, the perpetrators are done and gone. Is what we're trying to, I think, stop here. Go ahead, Mr. Lee.
In our review of this, and the city has taken great steps at reviewing this process and the problems with the process, and that's why we have Captain Nabel, who has spent every day of every month for the past 8 or 9 months working on this. We can tell you without hesitation that 97% of all alarms are false, whether it's a drugstore, a gun store, a bank, or somebody's house. The verification is there for the call that needs to be taken.
Right.
It's there for the safety of the first responders. While 97% of our manpower and personnel are off on a false alarm, They could be over here working on the thing that needs to be worked on. Being slack on the verification is not gonna make that better.
Well, now, this is only gonna apply, and we got a ton of people here, I've generated a ton of questions, but the way I understand this bill, it's only gonna apply to those that have contracted with the alarm company to make a direct call to you, no matter the situation, and they're willing to pay the expense for a false.
If the body wanted to make that better, you could do that. And that is the way a lot of responsible monitoring companies are doing. They have to have cameras. That one call can say, yes, look, here's a picture. They're in there now. That's the way to do it. It's not to lessen the standard. We're gonna
Okay.
take away a high standard that would seek to protect the folks that need it and the first responders who need the verification.
All right, I've got everybody up here wanting to ask questions now. Let me just start going down the list. Number 12.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to hear Sandy Springs has put in ordinances to try to address it. Clearly, that's not working. And the video, I think you see as a potential improvement. Is there liability, and if so, where does the liability fall on a two-step verification process if indeed the first call is accurate and however few seconds of delay results in some type of expanded or exacerbated injury? So let's
To the city?
the real call,
To the city, to the responder?
That's what I'm saying. Is there liability, and if so, where does it fall on any delay, no matter how short, a couple of seconds for that second verification, if it's a legitimate life safety alarm and dispatch is not immediately?
Liability to the first responder?
I'm asking, I don't know.
I mean, are you asking, is there any liability to the first responder or to the monitoring company?
Or to the city, or is there any liability at all for any delay?
Not to the, there's not any, there's not really a contract with the city, so could not be responsibility, could not be liability. To the contractor, the monitoring company, maybe so.
All right. Number 1. I've got 3 people dropped off. I'm sorry, I was going to get to you in a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the alarm system companies that have video, they're not required to be confirmation call or anything. Video dispatch.
Right now, the law requires 2-call verification.
Even though there's a video confirmation?
No, if there's video confirmation, that's an exemption. That was one of the, I believe there were three exemptions: video verification.
You're talking about in the bill?
In the existing law.
Okay.
Video verification, no 2-call required. Audio verification, no 2-call required. And then whatever his proposal was gonna add the extra one. And then panic alarms and duress alarms. The 2-call requirement is for intrusion alarms, which are those that are, and so far in 2018, they've actually gone to 99%, in Sandy Springs at any rate, 99% false.
If I'm a business owner and I don't have that, and I'm willing to, communicate that with you and my alarm company, why couldn't we just avoid that with this law and say, if it's a false alarm, I'm gonna pay you this amount, or whatever that is. I mean, like we were talking about, a delay in reaction time, you might as well just come the next day and do fingerprints and stuff like that. It's just.
Understandable. Seems like a reasonable comment, and the answer would be twofold. One is, I've been policing since 1988, 29 years, and I have not once caught a burglar in the act, because by the time even the first call gets to us, they're in and out, minute and a half, 3 minutes, they're out. And second, the whole point in the original law was to reduce the number of false alarm calls that were coming into our dispatch centers to start with. If we then relax that standard, of which we know already 99% of these calls, so Sandy Springs, we get 10,000 alarm calls a year. That's about 8% of our whole call volume. If we relax that standard, then that's going to have the opposite effect of what we're trying to accomplish, that the false alarm are going to go up, we believe.
Okay. Number 5.
Thank you,
number
Mr.
5.
Chair.
Okay.
So my question is, there are certain businesses, if people are you know, holed up and tied up in a banking situation and you're making calls. So is it that if they don't answer, you guys show up? Is that the deal, how that works?
Well,
The two-call verification as it currently stands?
how the call is handled is going to be between the alarm company and their customer, whether they, you know, did you give the right code number or code name or whatever.
Right.
For
But
us,
somebody
in the-
doesn't answer the phone.
in-
They're not available, they're not answering the phone, then is that an automatic?
The only requirement is to call one more different number, and if you still can't verify, then we come. That's it. It's not a very stringent to start with, but it's something to help us reduce these false alarms. Now,
Well,
in the
and
bank,
I understand the need to balance false alarms, but again, we're talking about public safety, and, you know, every second matters, especially when you're in, you know, like a home invasion or a business, you know, where you've got breaking and entering and, you know, possible hostages, you know, in banks. And so every second matters. So if you guys are delayed in getting there, does that not create some sort of liability as
Well, I think the gentleman
Representative
just
Harrell
stated,
was
though, by the
asking?
time they get there, in most situations, other than a hostage situation or a bank, you know, they're in there a minute and a half, and you guys can't get officers rolling in a minute and a half, because in most situations, you said they're in and out in a minute and a half.
Right, but it seems like this would help you prioritize and make a higher priority. But when you have those extenuating circumstances, whether it be, you know, robbing a bank or a home invasion, you know, they are staying longer. They're not in and out in a minute and a half. And so it seems like from a public safety standpoint, you would want to respond more quickly.
Currently, Representative, the panic alarms are exempt anyway. Currently, under current law, it does not apply.
But that's only if someone gets to the alarm and they're able to trigger a panic alarm, right?
That's right.
Okay.
And then it becomes, like Captain said, it's between the homeowner, business owner, and the monitoring company as to how you verify it.
So this just gives them another layer and option to provide their customers to offer a higher level of service.
Or if they do it without verifying, it subjects them to a penalty, as our ordinance in Sandy Springs reads. If they have a deal, every time the registration, this bill, the current law doesn't require the owner of the alarm, the holder of the alarm, or the monitoring company of the alarm to tell the police department or the fire department what kind of business or residence this is. So we won't know if it's a drugstore, a gun store, or a bank.
But you would
Representative Barrett,
know.
we're down to 5 minutes here. I might have to cut you, and I got 3 more questions.
Okay. So last thing, but you would know if it's a higher priority situation because they've opted to have that level of service with their alarm monitoring company, correct?
That's between them. The monitoring company could contract for that and call us after one call or no call. That's up to them. The liability, as Representative Harrell was talking about, would fall to them for that failure.
Okay.
And may I make just one clarification on your bank example? When the bank is open for business and that's a potential, their only kind of alarm there is a panic alarm, which doesn't ever require two-call verification. It's only for an intrusion alarm that would be after hours when the bank is closed and things like that, just for clarity.
All right, I'm gonna get, I think, the former mayor of, what city are you the mayor of, Chuck?
Whichever one you want, Mr. Chairman.
You're mayor of something,
I'm
wasn't you?
going with Alpharetta for now.
Alpharetta, I couldn't remember, okay.
Serious question. I understand, I mean, we had those when we were there, you know, when we put in our ordinance. But you talk about 97%, and I forget what Mr. Lee said relative to the total cost of $190K. How many false alarms you say you thought you had?
10,000?
10,000.
Well,
How many of those were from banks?
I don't have that number for you, sir.
Well, I mean, my point, and I understand it, but I mean, specifically, I guess, is not true, that I get when you, but prior to this amendment, I understand, you're kind of cutting the legs out from under the, hey, let's check this out and make sure the cat didn't set off the motion detector, that sort of thing. But given these, I just wondered, bank systems, pharmaceutical system, I forget exactly, I don't have the memo. it would seem that if we're limiting to that, those are more high-interest targets for the bad actors. It would seem like, and I would like the data that we would be limiting that to very specific instances that would probably be not your just average monitor. This is not two guys do monitoring that would be apt to mess it up. Is that not true? I mean, I'd like to get to those metrics, because I think with the amendment, it seems like we are not undercutting you, but getting to things where you would want to be, because somebody's probably not going to slip in and out of a bank before you get there.
I'd say again, Representative Martin, that this is available right now through contract with the purchaser of the alarm and the contractor of the monitoring company.
Well, it's actually not, because it says in the law, you shall be required.
Well, if they've got a video monitoring, I'm gonna cut y'all off right there. We got 7 minutes left, and we've got another gentleman that wants to speak, and I know I got 2 or 3 more lights lit up. Y'all can stay around. I want to get the other gentleman up here. In the interest of time, we'll come back to this. We have to, Mr. Frank, come on up, Frank, and tell us what you got, and we may have some. Maybe you can share some more light on this little subject here.
Yes, I could. I was involved with the original two-caller verification system when that was put in.
And you're with the Georgia?
I am. I'm the executive director of the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police, and I've been in law enforcement since January of 1969. Long time. Okay, long time. Okay, with that being said, I've answered alarms when I was a young officer. I recognize some of the problems with alarms, but when doing the two-caller verification, I agree with the Sandy Springs that most of the alarms are false alarms. And I would say 97% is a very good and accurate representation of all alarms being false. However, when you're looking at these 3 specific areas that we're looking out to carve as exceptions, I find them to be the most volatile areas that this committee ought to consider. We ought to consider gun dealers and gun shops as being something that we should respond to, and we ought to consider pharmaceutical establishments as something that we should carve out an exception for, and financial institutions, banking institutions. Now, I say that because the reality is we're faced with an opioid epidemic, so we have to consider, pharmacies being targeted often. Gun dealers, to get those guns out into the street would be absolutely absurd if we allow that to be not an exception from my humble point of view. Of course, it's your decision. So the reality is that I've heard from gun dealers who have a concern, and a legitimate concern. I recognize the concern on pharmaceutical dealers and recognize the concern on banking. I think the bill is pretty whole, and if you allow those 3 exceptions to be in there, certainly I would embrace the bill with the full force of the association behind it. And also, my GMA colleague has indicated that those 3 carvings would also serve the purpose of the Georgia Municipal Association.
Okay, thank you, sir. Number 8, you still have a question? Representative Welch?
Not for this witness.
Okay, you want witness. Whoa, we're going back to our lawyer term. Anybody got a question for this witness? All right. All right. I think Danny wants you and your witness to come back up. And I had, Representative Kirby, did you have a question too? Come on up, guys. Come on up. Y'all come back around if you would. We got 2 questions for you. Yeah. And Frank, we appreciate your input. Thank you, sir. All right, number 8, witnesses in the stand again.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Lee, good to see you.
Good to see you. Lord Welch.
Congratulations on your new employment with the City of Sandy Springs.
I need a job.
A couple of things. To Chairman Martin's point, I think it would be helpful if there is a distinction to be made. The distinction should be made as to the facts as they pertain to the 3 institutions that have been mentioned as an amendment to the bill. Secondarily, so if you'd like to present that data and show us where you have false alarms related to financial institutions, pharmaceutical, and or firearm dealers, wholesalers or retailers, that would be helpful to see those. The other is testified several times that it's how the contract is dealt with between the alarm user and the alarm provider. And it's that relationship that this bill is intended to impact in terms of a consumer choice manner. So if that is true, that is the arrangement between those two parties, and one is held culpable in terms of a penalty within the city of Sandy Springs or any other city for that matter, then buyer beware. If you choose this provision and this is your option, then there are consequences. They can learn those either by research or by citation. And the final point I'd like to make is that not everywhere in Georgia is camera surveillance available, but nearly everywhere in Georgia, every small town in this state has a pharmacy and has probably a bank. Fewer now than 10 years ago. But nevertheless, there are places that may not have that video capability, and so this would afford them a early response opportunity. Those are my comments more than questions, but if the data is there as the city of Sandy Springs has represented that these are false alarms pertaining to these three industries, then I'd like to see that data because I think that would be important for the committee to consider.
Let me get to the other question here. We got 2 minutes left before we got to vacate this room, and Representative Kirby has been more than patient.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just kind of following up on that same line. In the last 6 months, how many times you been to a bank, gun store, or pharmacy? I mean, I would think those would something you can remember. Or has it been, even if it's a lot, a few, none?
First thing I would point out is that this bill, nor the current law, requires the alarm holder to identify what kind of business it is. So
you don't know when you show up in front of the bank you're at the bank?
They would, yes.
Okay, how many times did you do that?
Well, Captain Naval hadn't been to one, and we don't distinguish that data, and that's the point I'm trying to tell you, is that these exceptions you put in this bill, nobody will know them. The alarm company it'll go off unless the alarm company tells them, and that would be controlled by the alarm owner telling the alarm company, hey, I'm a bank, I'm a drugstore, I'm a gun store. And then they would decide between the two of them whether or not they'd have two-call verification or not. And if there's never been a penalty applied when there wasn't a legitimate alarm with a one-call verification. So what I mean by that is the two-call verification never comes into play, would never come into play unless it is a false alarm. And it would have been false no matter what, if it had been one call or two calls.
Now, okay, I've got a Representative Kirby. Let me see. That doesn't make much sense to me. I mean, I've got an alarm system in my house, and I get a call every once in a while down here. Something's going off in the basement down there. I don't know, some cobwebs got in front of my monitor down in the basement, and it's blown and set the alarm off of something. They call me. I say, hey, something's going on at your house. You want to come out there? I say, no, I got a neighbor. I'll send down there and check it out. I think everything's all right. But they know, I mean, when they call, I mean, they know my house, they know my address, and they would know if it was a gun shop or a pharmacy or something.
The monitoring company knows. That's my point, is that's a decision between you and the monitoring company. Nothing in the bill, nothing in the current law requires the monitoring company to register with the city that this is a drug store, this is a gun store,
right,
this is a bank.
But if they, instead of calling me, if they call you directly and say, we got a gun shop down here, if they call you directly and say, we've got a gun shop, and the alarm's going off and we want you to respond.
It's not in the bill. It's not in the current law. It needs to, no, the exception's in there, but the requirement to tell the city is not in there.
All right, real quick, we got to get out of here. It's 3 o'clock. We're going.
I mean, I'm trying to understand this. I'm didn't stay at the Holiday Inn last night. But if we don't pass this bill, they go through, they still have to call just like they do now, and you're happy, correct? If the bill stays the same, you're happy, correct?
If we don't pass the bill.
Right, if it's the bill, you're happy. All right, so
we're against the bill.
All we're saying is for everybody except those 3 examples, it's going to happen just like it is today, and you're happy today, right?
I don't understand what you're saying.
If we leave it like it is, you're happy.
Leave the law like it is?
Yes, sir.
We're against the bill.
All right, so you're happy. But if we pass the bill with only 3 exceptions, if we only have those 3 exceptions, then everything else works like it is today, and you're happy. So only the alarms that come in from these 3 exceptions are gonna be impacted. Is that true or false?
That's the intent, I think.
Well, I mean, that's, if they don't do it like that, they're breaking the law.
They already break the law. We got
Well, I mean,
97% false alarms.
No, they
Well,
don't.
about 25% of those are not even registered.
I'm ready to move the bill if you are, Mr. Chairman. He won't listen to a discussion.
We've got to get out of here. It's, there's no more people to talk. Y'all have heard the discussion. It's up to the mind of the committee at this point. It's the mind of the committee now. It's before the committee. We have the amendment. Shaw Marie, you want to read the amendment? We do have an amendment to the bill. Okay. We're gonna hear okay, we got to move in a second. Let's hear the amendment.
Adding on line 30 after the word user is a banking institution or a wholesaler.
Pull that down closer to your mouth, please.
Adding on line 30 after the word user is a banking institution or a wholesaler or retailer of firearms or pharmaceuticals and it would continue on and read.
Has contracted with the alarm monitoring company. So we're adding it after user, those three areas, has contacted with the monitoring alarm company. Okay, we got to move in second. That's the amendment. Okay, we're voting on the amendment. Move in second on the amendment. Move the amendment. Second on the amendment. All in favor? All right, real quick. We
Yeah, I
gotta
mean,
get out of here.
to the learned attorney. So with the amendment, everybody that is not these three businesses would continue to operate the way they do today. Is that true or false? If you are not one of these businesses, you would continue to operate the way you do today. Is that correct?
That is my understanding.
Thank you.
All right, moving second on the amendment. Questions? All in favor of the amendment? Let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, like sign. All right, now to the bill as amended. Do we have a move on that? Got a move. Got a second. Any discussion about the bill as amended? Hearing none. All in favor of the bill as amended, say aye. Any opposed, like sign. All right, we are out of here and the next group's coming in. Thank y'all for being here.